That night, as I was preparing dinner, I asked Lionel what he wanted to eat. A normal child would say what his favorite food was, such as hamburger steak or fried chicken, but for some reason, Lionel seemed confused by my question rather than hesitant. "What's the matter? You may say what you want. Grandma will make everything for you." I asked him that, but he didn't answer what he liked, so I felt like I was blaming Lionel for forcing him to ask any more, so I told him to wait in the living room while watching TV without asking any more. After making a menu that the children seemed to like and putting it on the table, I called Lionel and decided to make it dinner time. However, in front of the dinner on the table, Lionel refused to sit in his chair at all. "What's the matter? Don't you want to eat?" Lionel shook his head sharply at my question. "Then why?" Then Lionel asked me with blank look. "Grandma, is today a good day for me to eat?" Lionel's words made me wonder if my ears had gone wrong, and I suspected deafness and empty ears. However, when I asked the question again, I realized that the words I heard back from Lionel were not misheard. "What? You said a good day to eat, but you eat 3 meals a day, right?" As I replied with more questions, Lionel suddenly jumped out of the window into the garden and started weeding. Surprised by Lionel's sudden eccentricity, I said, "Stop it," and took him who were weeding in my arms and put him back in the house. "Why do I have to stop?" "Grandma, I'm hungry." "You're hungry, aren't you?" So I prepared them for Lionel. "Why do you start weeding?" "Because my mom always says that I can't eat unless I help her." Continuing from the previous one, I couldn't hide my surprise at the unexpected words that came out of Lionel's mouth, and when I decided to ask him about the details of what he meant, I found out a ridiculous fact. When I was 22 years old, I fell in love at first sight with my husband, who had come to the company I was working for at the time from a rural area to a department transfer, and I desperately approached him at work and in my private life. Coincidentally, we were close to home, and before we knew it, we had developed into a relationship where we would meet up somewhere and go home together, even if we finished work at different times. One day, on the train to home, I couldn't stop my heart beating as he piled his body on top of me as if to protect me in the crowded train, so I involuntarily muttered to him in the crowd of people around me, "Will you go steady with me?" I must have looked sly at the time when I squeezed the sleeve of his suit and confessed with eyes of tears, perhaps from embarrassment. But he blushed at my words and said, "Please, Ms. Joanna." "No, Joanna," and without hesitation, we put our lips together and started dating safely. It was fast after that. We started living together immediately after dating, got married in the first year, and were blessed with child. Ever since I was a child, I dreamed of getting married and living a happy life, and I was blessed with a child, and we both thought of a name for the child who was born, and named him Brett. It was a moment when I was at the height of happiness. However, that happiness did not last long. When Brett was 3 years old, I was suspicious that my husband was always coming home unnaturally late, so I looked into it with the help of a friend who works at the same company as my husband. Then it turned out that my husband always left the office on time, and I heard that he had witnessed him disappearing into the hotel with a younger girl who was in the same department at the company after work. It was there that I knew for the first time that my husband's return home was always unnaturally late because he was meeting a younger woman. It was the proof of complete infidelity. When I asked about the affair when the evidence was complete, my husband also admitted to the affair. Wondering if our happy marriage was just a 4-year family affair, I slapped a ring in the divorce papers and decided to take Brett with me and break up with my husband. As a single mother, I worked hard to balance work and housework while raising Brett. Brett, who saw me doing my best at work and housework, helped me around the house as much as possible as a child, and did his best to reduce my burden as much as possible. I have fond memories of crying in the presence of other parents around me when I heard the essay about his future dreams in an elementary school class that said, "My dream for the future is to make my mother happier." Brett grew up quickly and is now 27 years old. He finally wanted to invite his lover, whom he had been dating for a long time, to our house as a marriage partner, and he was at an age where he showed his splendid adult side. "This is Haven. Mom, I am thinking of marrying her." Haven, who was introduced, had a clear personality without being too fearful, and I was impressed by her. "Brett, if you say this is the person you decided, I won't object." "Really, do you mean you'll allow us to marry?" "Yes, but instead you're going to be happy because I don't think there's anyone else like her, right? Understand?" "I know it. Haven, let's build a happy family together." "Yes. Thank you, mother-in-law." From my point of view, I intuitively felt that Brett and Haven were a good match, so I allowed them to marry and sent them to the sunny stage. "Congratulations on your marriage, Brett." Haven. It was a joyful and embarrassing moment when the wedding of the two was brought back memories of the past and shed large tears. A year later, the couple had a loving third family, Lionel. Brett and I were present at Lionel's birth, and it was a wonderful memory to cry and rejoice when we saw Lionel being born. But as a mother, it was also a happy sight to see Brett, who loves children, crying more than Haven, who tried her best to give birth. A few years later, I was contacted by Brett. When I asked him about it, he said that he would be assigned to the countryside alone for work, and during that time, he would ask me if I could go to see how Haven and Lionel were doing occasionally. "I think they would be fine, but I'm worried about Lionel getting to a certain age, so I want you to check on them once a week or so, not every day." I certainly understand Brett's concerns. In fact, even when Brett was little, he was a child who took a lot of work, and as soon as I took my eyes off him, he would go somewhere, and a child in the playful and impressionable period was too much to take care of only by a woman. Until now, Brett himself had been taking care of him and has managed to get by, but when it came to being away from home on a solo assignment, it was understandable that Brett, who was originally anxious, could not help but be worried. "Okay, it's Brett's request, and I want to see how my sweet grandson is doing." Relieved by this, Brett flew to the countryside on a solo assignment, and I went his home to check on the two of them on the weekend. I felt that I didn't have much on hand if I went their home without a souvenir, so I packed sweets that Lionel seemed to like and a ready-made side dish that could be preserved for the two of us. I chimed and looked into the camera on the intercom with a monitor to let them know I was coming, and Haven emerged from the front door with the sound of noisy footsteps coming from inside the house. "What? Mother-in-law? What's going on today?" "Oh, Brett is worried about the two of you while he's on assignment, so I'm going to come check on you." "Oh, that's right, it's a little messy and dirty, but go ahead." I felt a little uncomfortable with the appearance of Haven, who had a troubled expression on her face for a moment, but if you think about it, it is understandable that she would have such an expression if she was visited almost without an appointment. When I entered the house, I was greeted with a smile by Lionel, who was playing with drawing in the living room. Lionel, whom I had not seen in a long time, was naturally taller, and when he was a baby he had a cute face that could be mistaken for a girl, but now he had grown into a naughty face that was a boy. Yes, This is a souvenir, sweets and a side dish that I had made, so please eat it if you like. Wow, thank you so much. Brett is also really worried, so please take your time today, mother-in-law. At Heaven's suggestion, I enjoyed the reunion with Lionel to the fullest, playing board games and card games, and watching anime that Lionel liked. In the evening, we filled the table with ready-made side dishes that I brought in dishes made with Haven and had dinner together. When the three of us put their hands together and started eating dinner, I felt a little unnatural in the appearance of Lionel clinging to the strangely prepared dishes. For some reason, it seemed as if the images of hungry children overseas that I watched on my noon educational programs overlap. However, it was only an orphan overseas, and Lionel has a mother named Haven. It was impossible that he couldn't eat meals. Lionel, no one will take them if you don't stick to them so much, right? I urged Lionel to eat slowly, but Lionel was absorbed in the dishes in front of him, as if he couldn't hear the words. Lionel, he seems to be growing up lately, and it's always like this when he's eating. I'm sorry that he seems to be badly disciplined. Oh, you're growing up, you have to eat a lot from this age and grow up big. When I heard that it was a growing period, I was convinced and transferred the side dishes I had saved on my plate to Lionel's plate. After dinner, I cleaned up the dishes while making small talk with Haven, played with Lionel for a little bit one last time, and when it was time for the bus home, I decided to go home for the day. A few months later, I received a rare call from Haven. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry suddenly, but in fact, it seems Brett has fallen ill while on the go and I have to go to take care of him, so can I ask you to take care of Lionel for a while? I'm all right, but is Brett okay? Shall I go instead? I suggested that as Haven should take care of Lionel, but Haven shook her head and said she couldn't bother me, so I would take care of Lionel. I could understand the feeling of worrying that her husband might be sick and collapsed in a remote land. Understanding Heaven's feelings, I promised to take care of Lionel responsibly and decided to leave Brett's care to Haven. In the meantime, Haven was probably unable to keep her hands off Brett's care and I would not be able to contact her, so she was somehow reminded that she would contact me if anything happened. I wondered if this was also a sign of her willingness to take care of him completely, and I watched Haven go with Lionel to Brett's place. I wonder Dad is okay. I'm sure he'll be fine, don't worry, because your dad always been a strong child who could get rid of a cold quickly. And he will be with your mom, so don't worry. I comforted the worried Lionel and took him home. Since I met him a few months ago, I thought that my life with my grandson would surely be enjoyable after a long absence, and I decided to make this fleeting time a little more enjoyable and memorable, even though I felt a little bad for Brett. Lionel, let's go to Grandma's house and play with the toys that Grandma used to play with. I've always been a good owner, so I've been keeping the toys that I and Brett used to play with when I was a kid as a memory, and I've only recently taken care of them so that I can let Lionel play with them when he's old enough to play. Really? Hooray. I was relieved to see Lionel, who had been looking worried earlier, happy to hear that he had an old toy. When Lionel arrived at my house, we immediately spent a relaxing time watching nostalgic frames, board games, and anime that Lionel said he wanted to watch. That night, as I was preparing dinner, I asked Lionel what he wanted to eat. A normal child would say what his favorite food was, such as hamburger steak or fried chicken, but for some reason, Lionel seemed confused by my question rather than hesitant. What's the matter? You may say what you want. Grandma will make everything for you. I asked him that, but He didn't answer what he liked, so I felt like I was blaming Lionel for forcing him to ask any more, so I told him to wait in the living room while watching TV without asking any more. After making a menu that the children seemed to like and putting it on the table, I called Lionel and decided to make it dinner time. However, in front of the dinner on the table, Lionel refused to sit in his chair at all. "What's the matter? Don't you want to eat?" Lionel shook his head sharply at my question. "Then why?" Then Lionel asked me with blank look. "Grandma, is today a good day for me to eat?" Lionel's words made me wonder if my ears had gone wrong, and I suspected deafness and empty ears. However, when I asked the question again, I realized that the words I heard back from Lionel were not misheard. "What? You said a good day to eat, but you eat 3 meals a day, right?" As I replied with more questions, Lionel suddenly jumped out of the window into the garden and started weeding. Surprised by Lionel's sudden eccentricity, I said, "Stop it," and took him who were weeding in my arms and put him back in the house. "Why do I have to stop?" "Grandma, I'm hungry." "You're hungry, aren't you?" So I prepared them for Lionel. "Why do you start weeding?" "Because my mom always says that I can't eat unless I help her." Continuing from the previous point, I decided to ask Lionel for more information about what he meant, while I couldn't hide my surprise at the unexpected words that came out of his mouth. According to the story, Haven had been forcing Lionel to help out at home and be a good boy after Brett left for a solo assignment, and she didn't feed him unless he obeyed to her. He told me that, as a result, he would take advantage of Haven's time to go out while Lionel was sleeping, looking for food left in the house that could be eaten, and if there wasn't, he would wait until Haven returned. I couldn't stop the tears of sadness from my eyes, regardless of the tear glands at my grandson's shocking life, and I remembered the last time I visited Haven's house. At that time, Haven said that he was eating because he was growing, but I was sure that he hadn't eaten until then. Why did I pretend to understand and be convinced when I must have felt a little uncomfortable, and didn't realize Lionel's true feelings? I regretted and reflected on my actions that, if I had noticed it at that time, and I would have noticed the abnormality earlier, and at the same time I was angry with Haven. "Here, Lionel, you may not know right now, but your mom is wrong. You don't have to be a helper or a good boy to eat well. From now on, Lionel is going to grow up." I told Lionel so, and when I made him sit down on the chair again, we enjoyed together the dinner I had prepared, and after dinner we watched anime together and ate watermelon for dessert. When I saw that Lionel had fallen asleep with a full stomach, I left a message for Brett to let him know what was going on, telling him to be sure to contact me when he felt better. I had been told not to contact Haven except to contact from her, but I couldn't keep that promise anymore. I immediately received a phone call after I sent the message to Brett. I had always wondered if Haven was managing his phone because he wasn't feeling well, but I was a little relieved when he contacted me right away. "Mom, what the hell is this? Lionel had not been fed while I am away." "There's no way, it's just as I told you. Isn't Haven with you nearby?" "Huh? Haven? There's no way Haven is on my location of own assignment, right? I asked you about the two of them." There was a discrepancy with what Haven was talking about. "She said that Brett was sick and that she was going to take care of you at the place where you were assigned, so she left Lionel with me." "Sick? I'm not. First of all, if that's the case, I'll contact you as well, okay?" "That's true, too. If something happens on the go, he should be able to contact me." This time, however, there was no such thing. and it was only when Haven informed me that he was not feeling well, and now that I think about it, it's obviously strange that I can't contact her because she would take care of him. Asking Haven not to contact them unless she herself contacts me seemed like she would try to keep me away and hide something. Speaking of which, I remembered Haven telling me not to come home even if I had a long holiday. I don't know, but this is. It was here that both of them realized that Haven had lied to us. In addition, Lionel told me that Havens went out at night, but it seemed that all of the content was new to us. As we talked, Brett's resentment of Haven was palpable over the phone. After hearing all the stories, Brett said that he would take paid leave next day and return to Lionel, and ended the contact for the day. The next day, Brett came home first thing in the morning and hugged Lionel, which had come to the front door with me, with tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Dad. What's wrong?" Lionel: "I'm sorry for being a helpless father." It seemed that Brett's feelings had already been made up after yesterday's contact, and had decided that he had no choice but to divorce the person who went out at night with her own son in this way. Based on Lionel's story and the fact that she had no contact or appearance, we suspected that Haven was having an affair because he was away alone and not by her side, so we searched for evidence at home. We searched for a Haven room at home and a closet where she could hide things, but she was taking measures against physical evidence. But when we checked the history of the PC, it turned out that she had made a reservation for a hotel stay. Since the reservation was only reserved for 2 people, there was a possibility that she was staying out alone with their affair partner. That was all the evidence, but it was more than enough to suspect infidelity. Based on these evidences, Brett asked a detective agency to investigate the affair. A week later, without knowing that Brett knew everything, she contacted me to say that he had recovered and she would return the next day. I immediately forwarded the content to Brett, who also took paid leave to wait for Haven to pick up Lionel at my house. Unsuspecting, Haven arrived triumphantly at my home, a place that would be a shambles from then. "Lionel, I've come for you." Haven met Brett's eyes as he opened the door with an angry expression. I locked the front door to prevent Haven from escaping the place, led her to inside the room, and set up a place to talk. "I've heard all about it from Lionel, and it looks like you didn't give him a single decent meal while I was gone." Brett rushed at Haven with an angry look, but Haven refused to make eye contact and muttered in a low voice, "It was discipline." Brett, who was angry at her attitude of not making eye contact, further confronted her with the results of the affair investigation and a copy of the accommodation history of the 2 people of the hotel found in the history of the PC from his bag, and demanded a divorce and custody of Lionel. "I can't leave Lionel to you because if something happens to Lionel, I'll not be very comfortable with it." "Hang on. That's such terrible. I didn't this because I liked it." "So what? Did the partner have your weakness like a daytime drama? So you say that you were doing it at a hotel with someone you don't like. Isn't it too convenient?" "I've had a lot of trouble. I'm tired of seeing everything from the housework to Lionel after you went far away." Haven said that Brett's assignment left her alone and she had to take care of the housework alone, and she took her frustration out on Lionel because of the pain, and she filled her healing with infidelity in the form of an affair. In a clearly sympathetic remark, Brett scratched his head and took out some photos of the man from the bag and slammed to the floor. It wasn't until Lionel told me that he had secretly witnessed Haven's nighttime outings when Brett couldn't get home from work, or chatting happily with her boyfriend. "With all this evidence, can you say the same thing? I'll say only one more time. I'm divorcing you. I'll have custody of Lionel." Okay, I don't care. if you do it yourself, I'm going to break up. I'm going to marry that man who loves me. Shut up. I said only one more time. You're miserable. Brett's words made Haven turn red from anger and storm out of the house, struggling for a moment to unlock the key I had locked. Lionel tried to hold Haven back for a moment, but I gently held him back. Lionel gave me a look as to why I was stopping, but I just looked straight into his eyes and shook my head. Dad, did you quarrel with Mom? Lionel, who didn't quite understand the situation, looked at Brett with blank look. Look, Lionel, you may not understand it yet, but your dad and Mom didn't fight. We said goodbye to each other, but from now on you will live happily with me. Brett said that he would not put any more worry and stress on Lionel, making eye contact with Lionel and daring to smile and pat his head. I could only watch the situation from the side, but seeing Brett's kindness, I decided to support the two of them as much as possible behind their back. At a later date, we received additional investigation results from the detective agency, and in fact, it seemed that Haven's affair partner was a married person, and the affair was discovered and a large amount of alimony was demanded. Haven believed in her affair partner, but he seemed to have chosen to rebuild his relationship with his wife, and Haven, who was abandoned, tried to repair her relationship with Brett, but his lawyer had told her not to approach him, so she had no choice but to live alone. Brett decided that he couldn't leave Lionel alone after this incident, so he changed to a fully remote job and decided to live with the three of us at my house. Lionel, who was fond of me, was confused at first, but as time went by, he got used to the environment and knows what is where in the house, so now Brett asks him where the nail clipper is. I also cook homemade and warm meals every day so that Lionel doesn't go hungry alone like he used to, and enjoy the meal while having fun conversations with the three of us. Don't let Lionel go hungry and listen to people's moods and expressions, and we won't have to see him like that anymore. I hope that Lionel's memories will only be warm memories of his family. Today I make a delicious meal, and I feel happy to see the faces of Lionel and Brett as they fill their mouths with it, and their stomachs with relish.